Hey, cool kids. Welcome back into the Cool Grandpa podcast. This week, I am going to be talking to you about the leadership traits that I believe Santa Claus has and how we can embody those leadership traits, whether we're in our family environment or we might be at work or in some other kind of team environment. But first, I want to remind you that everything in my bookstore right now is 30% off. So, although we're coming up on Christmas, I'm going to run this 30% off sale all the way through mid January. So, if you're looking for a cool polo shirt, a ball cap, a set of tumblers, whatever it might be, go over, check out my web store, and see if there's something there that wouldn't make the grandpa in your life, or heck, even yourself, have a big smile on your face, and really be proud of being a cool grandpa. So, like I said, today we're diving into Santa Claus's leadership traits. And what we're going to do is really focus in on what we can start to bring out of ourselves, or at least recognize. So, Santa isn't just a beloved figure. He's a world class leader. And of all the different leadership traits that Santa Claus has, we're just going to explore four different traits. There's a whole lot that we could really dive into and get really granular as far as what Santa brings out into the world as far as leadership. But I want to really focus in on just these four. And if you're already doing these things, that is fantastic. And if you're falling a little short, like I do sometimes, then hey, it's a great reminder to put into our goals for 2026 how we can magnify these four leadership traits. Now, trait number one is what I like to call vision casting. Now, vision casting is also very similar to what people might say as far as, bringing out what the mission is that you're trying to accomplish. And what we're looking for here is Santa being really crystal clear on what his mission is. It's simple. Santa loves and is focused on spreading joy, building connections, and bringing magic to children everywhere. His vision is simple, powerful, and understood by all. I mean, heck, it doesn't get much more simpler than that, right? Hey, we're going to bring joy to people. We're going to be able to build magic into the hearts of children. We're going to be able to build connections. I mean, think of how many times people have these wonderful stories about how they grew closer to a grandmother, closer to an uncle, closer to an aunt, closer to a cousin, because they were able to spend the holidays together as a family. So, for applying this to a grandfather or a grandparent, what I want you to do is think about setting a positive vision for your family. If you don't have a family vision, that's okay. Now's a great time to start to sit and think about what that is. Maybe the vision for your family is going to be one of service, one of education, one of, let's say, being frugal or savings, right? Whatever that is, and however that looks to you, this is a great time of year to start to think about it and start to bring that vocabulary out when you're having discussions with your adult children as well as your grandchildren, assuming they're old enough to really pay attention to it. The other part that grandpas and grandparents can really bring out is to create the traditions and model hope for their families. Now, modeling traditions is going to be a little bit tricky because, as we've heard from a number of different guests, different generations now are really focused differently on traditions. So, where I think the silent generation, the greatest generation, the baby boomers, Generation X, a lot of us really embrace that whole like you're going to bend over backwards and you're going to break your neck to make sure that you get to grandma and grandpa's house for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. You're going to make sure that you get all the family together and that you're going to have these traditional dishes. Well, what we're finding out and what we're listening to experts on is millennials and other generations have different views about traditions, and that's okay. But I think there's room as a grandfather creates a vision for the family that you can start to really bring out what is it at the core that you want as a tradition. And maybe that tradition is going to be spread around the families, right? One son and daughter-in-law and their family are going to go look for, the traditional Christmas tree out in the woods, and maybe somebody else is going to go find a Christmas tree somewhere else. But the idea is you're all going to go find that Christmas tree. You just might be doing it differently and then sharing what those memories are using technology. Maybe you all jump on a Zoom call. Maybe you FaceTime with each other, and everybody's sharing pictures of the Christmas trees or the holiday decorations that you're putting up. Whatever it is, that's creating and fostering that sense of tradition and modeling hope for the future. The other thing, too, that grandfathers can do in this is really be an emotional anchor during the holiday season. For a lot of people, young and old, the holidays get to be a very hard time of the year. Now, some of that could be related to less sunlight and some biological type things. Some of this could also be memories of loved ones that have been lost recently. And some of it could just be people just having a hard time. But this is a great opportunity to really embrace being that rock for people, assuming that you have the emotional capacity to do it. And what I mean by that is maybe you're going through struggles, and grandparents can do a great job of, putting arms around people, whether really physically or virtually, and really being able to give hope and be there and really share a positive vision for individuals as well as the whole family. Now, I want you to think about how you're going to do this in a team environment. So, as a leader, whether you're at work or whether you're just in a volunteer capacity, whatever it is, you want to be able that you can restate the vision and mission of your team often in that it's simple enough that everybody understands what it is. We also want to be just like Santa in that everybody understands why you're doing what you're doing. That why, that motivation is front and center along with everybody's understanding of what that mission is. And then third, bring optimism into those meetings. Now, there's times as managers, as team leads, that you have to take on a different role. But by and large, if you have to have some criticisms, if you have to have some hard discussions with team members, customers, whoever it might be that you have to have these conversations with, you want to be sure that there's an element of optimism. So you can tell bad news, but hopefully as a leader, you also have a plan on what you're going to do. And then that's when you start to put in that optimistic, magic into it, in that you start to go, okay, we've had some tough times, we've had some setbacks. Here's what we're doing to address it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to see some fantastic results. We're going to turn this project around. We're going to make sure that things move in the right direction and that everybody's going to be satisfied as we come out of this period of hardship. So be sure that you bring that optimism into those meetings. Now, trait number 2 is empowering the team. Hey, look, Santa trusts the elves. Santa empowers his elves by giving them trust and autonomy and responsibility. We talked about that first trait, which is really casting that vision, setting the mission for the team. And the next part of this thing is he's trusting the elves to execute, right? It doesn't mean that he walks away and he never checks in on how the workshop's going. No, what he's doing is he's trusting the elves to be able to go do what they need to do, maybe in a slightly different way than Santa would, but in a way that gets the job done. Now, how do we apply trusting the elves with a grandparent application? Let the grandparents or let the grandkids participate in tasks. When you have to go run errands, when you have to do cleaning the house for the holidays, if you have people coming in, get the grandkids involved, get them moving and helping out. Don't let them sit there on the couch on their tablets and phones. Get them moving, get them active, have them get the buy-in, and then maybe give them a task to do and then let them go do it. And maybe they don't do it exactly the way grandpa or grandma would, but maybe that task gets done anyway. And that's when you come back in and you congratulate them and you show them off and you brag on them. The other part of this too, for a grandpa application in terms of trusting the elves, is ask for their ideas, ask for your grandkids. Heck, they've probably seen so many different reels and shorts and all sorts of different things. Maybe they've done some of these activities in scouts or their youth programs at church or whatever it might be. Maybe they actually have a better way to skin the cat than what you do. So ask for their ideas, get their input in when it comes to tasks, get their input on how to decorate that tree, how to hang the lights, whatever it is, make sure you ask them. And then lastly, we want to teach those grandkids and then let them try. And this ties right back into the first part, right? If the grandkids don't know how to do something, walk them through, teach them that skill. They're not going to be perfect and it's going to take a long time, but then let them try. You know, I've got a great friend of mine, and he tells a story of how when he was growing up on a farm in Colorado, they had enough cattle, they had enough, big equipment that they would use essentially a semi to haul cattle to market and go to livestock auctions, bring cattle back, all that sort of thing. Well, when he was old enough to drive, essentially dad threw him the keys, told him to back the trailer up into a very tight spot. Now, my friend knew how to operate the cab and the tractor, but he had never really backed up a big 48-foot or 53-foot, I forget how long it was, a trailer before. And so it took him hours to get that done. But by the time he figured out exactly how to turn that trailer so he could back it in to where it needed to go in that tight space, he had learned how to be able to maneuver that trailer in any kind of situation. So it really built up a lot of confidence. And it's something that sometimes parents, especially, but grandparents also have a tough time doing. And that is teaching a skill, giving instruction, and then being able to walk away and let the grandkids figure it out, even if it takes them a long time to do so. So in a private sector, team environment, work environment, we make sure that we delegate ownership. We distribute that decision making across as many team members as we possibly can. We coach up the team instead of trying to micromanage or control every single thing they do. We also understand as part of this that they're going to do things a little bit different than what we would do. If it's not going to wreck the ship, let them do it. And, you have to let them do it, even if they're going to do something the hard way. They need to learn that it's the hard way themselves versus you jumping in, micromanaging, and taking out that part of learning from their professional development. Now, sometimes you absolutely have to, so I'm not arguing that, and you do what you have to do. But I'm just saying, if it's not super critical, if it's not going to crash and burn, it may not be perfect the first couple of times you review it, but let them iterate, let them learn, and let them and coach them up so that they can get to the level that you need them to be at. The last thing on this part is celebrate that initiative. When you have elves, when you have grandkids, when you have team members that are going out and they are trying to, be productive, they're trying to take ownership, they're trying to lead in the ways that they can, make sure that you celebrate that initiative. I've been in different organizations where initiative really got shot down. If it wasn't cleared through your manager, your manager's manager, your manager's manager, then you just didn't do it. And I think that really stifled a lot of the young people that I worked with, including myself, when essentially you had decision-making ability taken away from you. And then you also basically didn't want to do anything until you checked with your boss, you checked with the boss's boss, and you checked with the boss's boss's boss before you did anything. And I think that just slowed everything down. And then it also makes you feel like you have no control over your own work environment. So I want to talk about trait number 3, and that's consistency of character. When we think about Santa Claus always shows up. Santa's the picture of consistency. He shows up the same day with the same mission every single year. He's always there. He's as steady as the sun rising each and every day. So how do we apply showing up consistently in a grandparent application? One, we've got weekly calls, maybe weekly texts. We are showing up to events when we can. Maybe if you're a long distance grandparent, you can't be to every soccer game. You can't be to every concert. You can't be to every stage play. You can't be to everything. But when you do have the chance to be with the grandchildren, to be with the family, that you're there. And I would even suggest that you're there for even the really special events, and you're going to have to define what a really special event is. For me, those special events really are kind of like first birthdays. They could also be when kids move. Let's say, I'm not going to say every graduation, like kindergarten to first grade, first to second, anything like that, but maybe when they move from elementary school to middle school to high school graduations, college graduations. Maybe you want to be out there for prom, take your own prom pictures, whatever it is. You define those events, but you're showing up and you're present and you're consistent with the way you show up. You don't show up with grudges. You don't show up in a foul mood because you're in a tiff with your adult children. You show up and you support them, and you show up the same way every single time. The other part of this too is with family rituals and traditions. And we talked about this in kind of that first trait, right? When we're defining the vision and mission for our families, is being able to be part of those rituals and traditions. So maybe when babies are being blessed, you're there. Maybe you're part of that. Maybe you're part of other significant religious events within your grandchild's life. Maybe you are the one that reads the night before Christmas. Maybe that's your part of it when it's a Christmas tradition. So make sure that you're showing up consistently for those rituals and traditions where you play an active role in. Don't just not show up. So in, let's say, a workplace environment, and how we apply this to the workplace, we keep our word. We're consistent. When somebody gets in trouble or reprimanded for something or corrected or coached up on whatever it is, make sure that the other team members, if they fall into that same category, you coach them up, you reprimand them as you need to, and you praise them. I mean, keeping your word isn't always a negative thing, but it's saying, hey, if you're promising that you're going to give everybody Friday off or half a day before a holiday, keep your word. Don't suddenly jerk that back from people, because they won't know how to read you, how to read the situation. And that's super important for people. Predictability is huge. So showing up and being consistent is a big part of this. The other thing too with this is model that steadiness. In your leadership journey in Santa Claus, you're going to have ups and downs. I mean, with Santa Claus, he's going to run into supply chain issues. There might be labor issues that he's got to deal with. He's got to be the same no matter what the situation is. So even though you might be screaming and yelling inside yourself, you got to keep your outside cool and calm and collected, and be that model of steadiness. And then I've already touched on this. Make sure that you're reliable and you're consistent. Make sure you show up the same way every time. Make sure meetings, if you're joking around with people, make sure you joke around with everybody. Make sure that They know where those lines are for what's appropriate, inappropriate with you. And then I'm going to talk about this last part. This is trait number 4. And trait number 4 I thought was important for this time of year, and it's important all year round. And that's being a joyful servant. Now, we've heard a lot over the years about servant leadership, and that's certainly true. Looking out for your troops, looking out for your family members, making sure that you're serving them, make sure that you're coaching them up, making sure that you give them clear vision and mission so that they can execute and go forward the best of their abilities. That's super important. So this is very much in that. And along with the servant leadership, I want to say leading with generosity. Santa leads with joy, kindness, and service. And how do we apply that as a grandparent? We're going to laugh often. We want to have fun. We want to enter our grandkids' world. We want them to share with us. One of my sayings is that the best way that you can build a connection with grandchildren is to allow them to teach you something. So you go into their world, you find out what silly, stupid saying is going on that's popular with them, and you figure out why it is. Let them know that it's okay for them to come share just the silliest story that makes absolutely no sense. But it's important to them that you understand their story and why they think it's funny. And all this is building a connection through fun. Now, for our professional or our volunteer scenarios or outside the family scenarios, how do we show that generosity? We celebrate those wins. Just today, I had a young man that I had to pull out of class for some behavior issues. And up until today, that young man would have gone kicking and screaming and we would have had all sorts of issues. But he walked out, he listened to me, and essentially, instead of taking him to the principal's office, we found a place to sit and just talk. And for that young man, that was a huge, huge win. And so I went around and I was telling all the staff that I was finding how this young man was able to control himself, control his emotions, get himself regulated, and how we didn't have to go to the principal's office. We didn't have to take that kind of a timeout from class. And even though he did something incorrect that got him out, the correct thing and the thing we really celebrated was the fact that he was able to walk with me, sit down in the lobby of the school, and we could sit and have a discussion about what he did. He accepted the feedback, and then we walked back to class. That's a huge win for him. So making sure that I was bragging on him in front of the other teachers and staff was big. How much he got that, I don't know. But even when I was working in professional services, being able to talk about your young consultants that really came through in the clutch, that figured out a unique solution to a scenario that had been really holding up the project. Show your team to your management and to other people how awesome they are, and you're going to get more and more of that back. Make sure that you're serving your team. As one of the simplest things that you can do as a team lead is you can sometimes give them little extras. And I'm not talking about like a cookie on Founders Day. What I'm talking about here is really making sure that if somebody has an urgent need for some extra time off, you get them the time off, and then you figure out how you're going to record that later. Just send them home, send them where they need to be. You also go back to that other trait we were talking about. You coach them up, you give them feedback, you give them direction, and you put the guide rails in place so that they can't make those real critical errors, but they can learn, and you serve your team by giving them clear direction and giving them some boundaries and then letting them move forward. And then the last thing too is you lead with that encouragement. Part of being generous is being generous with your encouragement, being generous with your praise, being generous with making sure that they know that they're appreciated. Everything today is very transactional, I think, in most business environments. And if you want team members to stick around a few more months, another year or two, you need to be giving them a lot of encouragement and a lot of praise and making sure that they're getting visibly recognized for the achievements that they have. So, to close, look, Santa Claus, we could go in and there's probably a volume. John Maxwell could probably go do a big old book on Santa Claus's leadership abilities. But the four that we chose to listen to and talk about, and I appreciate you listening to me, is Santa Claus's vision, his empowerment, his consistency, and his joyful service or generosity. So I hope this has been beneficial to you. As a reminder, if you're not doing these things already, let's make sure 2026 we do a couple more of these things. You don't have to be perfect. So Santa reminds us that leadership is all about influence. It's all about heart and presence. And that is something that I hope every grandparent and parent that's listening to this really takes to heart and understands and really becomes part of you. Remember, it's about influence, it's about heart, and it's about presence. Everything else kind of fills itself in if you have those four traits that we talked about and those three things right here at the end. So, look, thank you for joining me today on the Cool Grandpa podcast. I hope that you and your family are together, and I wish nothing but the best for you coming up in 2026.